Hello, I'm Soycat, and I got a lot of Americans telling me that as a British person, I should stay out of American politics, but as a contrarian, I actually disagree. And as someone who really admires the First Amendment, I'm going to utilize those rights that I don't have, and I'm going to make this video going through every single amendment because I like the First Amendment, and most non-Americans do, and I have slightly more mixed feelings on the Second Amendment, but I want to go through every single amendment and put them on a tier list, and so that's precisely what I'm doing today. And so obviously we have to start with the First and Second Amendments that everyone knows, but I'm going to be learning about the rest from Congress itself. This is constitution.congress.gov. They have a very simplified version of every amendment, and then a very not simplified version if you feel like reading into it, and so I'm going to go through each of the amendments and rank them according to what I think as a British person. So first things first, I love the First Amendment, and I think everyone does, especially if you like to express yourself at any time. I think the First Amendment, the ability to criticize your own government, we could say, just to simplify it down, is such a powerful right because it sucks so bad at the time. No one wants your government to be criticized in the moment, but in the long run, it really, really helps a country actually stay stable because you can't just silence the people or whatever. Being able to criticize and being able to say whatever, not free from consequences, but without being free from attacked by your own government, is really great. The Second Amendment is something I think a lot of Americans put right up there with it. However, as a British person, I would say that if you look at the implementation of the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, or as the Congress.gov puts it, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If you look at the actual way it's implemented, which is the way we have to kind of view most of these, then you could say like, well, yeah, Americans have the right to bear arms, but that varies so much by the state that you're in as it is. You know, like you can't just have any weapon you want. You can't own a tank and an assault rifle in most states. And so I think that if you're looking realistically at the way it works, you get the worst of both worlds. In the UK, people think we don't have guns. We actually do. It's quite easy to get your hands on one. But we banned guns after a very serious shooting, and so you can get guns if you know about them, but really deranged people don't think that they can use guns to commit massacres, and so generally do not. Whereas in the United States, you get all the downsides of, like, you know, not actually really having the right, but you get the only upside, and you get the really bad downside of, like, yeah, it should actually be a state-by-state issue, right? I think that within the United States, if federalism is to exist, you should have states say, yeah, actually, not that big of a fan of guns in big urban areas like New York, for example, but maybe guns make a lot of sense in somewhere much less urban like Vermont, and that's how it should work, but in reality, it seems like it's not. It's the right to bear arms just makes everyone go, You don't get any of the benefits, you get all of the downside, and so D tier, that's right, we're starting spicy. So the Third Amendment, you know, everyone knows about the First and Second Amendment. You can use your First Amendment to argue why you should have the Second Amendment, but can you use the Second Amendment to guarantee the third one? I guess with a gun you can guarantee any of these amendments. Well, the Third Amendment is that no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. In other words, I think this is saying that you can't have American soldiers just decide to be in people's houses. I assume it also means foreign soldiers, but I'm just going to have to assume that it means American soldiers can't just decide to go in your house and say, yeah, but we're gonna be here, we're protecting your country, which is broadly a good thing. I don't think there's any way to be against this as an amendment. Yeah, again, like, having the consent of the owner means that you could decide against this in the same way you can decide against your freedom of speech. You can choose not to say anything. You can decide against your freedom to own guns by not. You just can't be free from other people's choices with guns, I guess. But you can, there's no good reason not to love this amendment. S tier. It is, I would question why it needs to be an amendment, but I know America has a wild history of stuff like that, so I'll accept, sure. Seems like a good amendment. In fact, if it's so important though, why isn't it in the actual Constitution? We'll leave that aside. Anyway, the Fourth Amendment is the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation. And that is a bit of an interesting one because, again, I feel like in practice, this in theory, this is great. It should be another S tier, right? I feel like if you look at the practice of it, though, it's like, yeah, well, we sort of excluded huge swaths of things from this, including data. If I am fairly sure I'm correct about this. At the US border, as a non-US citizen, you might say, well, your rights don't apply. But as an American, you have to hand over your devices and the passcodes because that's not deemed to be unreasonable searches. This seems like one of those amendments where it was designed well, but it clearly has enough loopholes inside of it. And if you design a constitution that lets the government opt out, but makes you feel like you can't, that's a bad amendment. So I'm going to put it down here in the D tier. Intended well, implemented poorly. Next up, we've got, again, just based on my explanation, my understanding, and my interactions of the United States, the Fifth Amendment is that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces. So if you're in the military, you're exempt. Also, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due... Man, that's a complicated one. So it's basically saying your rights to not be tried by the government for an infamous crime over and over again. Once you have been found not guilty, you're fine. And also you can't testify against yourself, which is interesting because, again, on the surface, it seems dumb to have the right not to have to testify against yourself. But if you legally have to say the truth in court, then forcing you not to, I guess, perjure yourself seems like a good thing. I don't know how poorly, or I guess the Fifth Amendment is actually one that you hear in TV shows a lot. I don't know how well this actually works in real life, but I think it's pretty good. I'm pretty sure it's an A tier. I don't think it's S tier because it's not like a, wow, this makes your life so much better. But in the cases where you are called for a crime, I'm sure it's nice not to have to plea against yourself. So the Sixth Amendment is that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. That seems great. Does anyone dislike the idea of a speedy and public trial? Nah, I think that's going right in the A tier. The Seventh Amendment is in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20. That would have been a lot when this was written, right? I don't know what the conversion would be from there to here dollars, but I bet it's like quite a lot of money, whereas now $20 is like less than the amount that you can get away, significantly less than the amount where you'll get prosecuted for shoplifting in most states. But the right of the trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be re-examined in any court of the United States other than according to the rules of common law. I think one of the states doesn't use common law, right? So I bet that, does that cause some interesting? But yeah, the idea of this is right to the jury for any, I believe, for civil issues, which is really, really interesting because I wouldn't say you need right to a jury for civil issues, but it seems nice to have, right? I'm going to put that as a B tier amendment. Yeah, glad it's in. I mean, like, if you had to cut down the amendments, it would be one of the first ones you'd consider. But, you know, there's no harm being done with it. So excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Okay, is there... I guess we'd have to look into the explained and look into what the limits on this are, but just on the surface, this is S tier, right? No one likes cruel and unusual punishment. Although again, if we're being fair, I think you can be cruel and unusually punished if you just go to that one part of American territory, you know, the one, it's the only American McDonald's, or the only Cuban McDonald's. So I guess you could argue that if you do get sent to the Denich Fitness Center and the McDonald's and the real Tree of Life, then you lose those rights and therefore the rights are implemented poorly. And I don't really love that, so I think we're gonna have to say this is D tier. Or yeah, at least C tier, I think, because it is largely listened to, but only for Americans, and maybe you could argue that's all the American Constitution should protect. But I also think the American Constitution is going to make reference to people becoming Americans. I don't know which amendment that is, but I know people are always talking about it. The Ninth Amendment is that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So, yeah, in other words, you should... No, I don't understand this at all, actually. Certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Okay, so if I'm getting that off the top of my head, then it's saying that you shouldn't, just because there is a right listed in the Constitution, or rather, because a right isn't listed in the Constitution, it shouldn't not be retained by the people. I guess saying kind of like a safe harbor that just because it's not specifically listed as not a crime, then it isn't a crime. I don't know why that needs to be an amendment, so it feels like a good one in general, but it doesn't feel like it ever comes up, right? Is the Ninth Amendment ever useful? As it turns out, looks like not really, based on the fact that there's only 3 annotations on it. 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. Oh, that's not the one. That's got to be the one I was thinking of. The power delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or the people. In other words, saying the United States doesn't have all of the power. Any power specifically not held by the United States is held by the states, or, failing that, by the people, which is the correct way to do government. I think at least it is the not way that we do it in European countries, where we've historically had kings who had the power to do anything within reason, and then there were checks on their power, and it was anything in reason except what we specifically don't like. I guess really not even anything within reason. Just kings could do anything, right? But the United States is saying, no, we will specifically give ourselves powers to do things, and if we don't, it's up to you. And that seems like again, as someone who is, if you look through history, there's a lot of tyrannical governments. Having the ability to protect yourself, pretty great. In fact, I would say that's at the top of my S tier, if I can, or the top of my A tier. That's a very solid right. It's a fundamental question that you need to have, though, and I'm not going to say it's like S tier, like freedom of speech. It's going to be an A tier, but top of A tier, I think. 11th Amendment, the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subject of any foreign state. That's a lot of legalese, but I think it's saying that the United States can't be sued. The United States can't sue citizens of another country. No, okay. The United States cannot be used to sue someone who lives in another state, or you can't sue a state as a foreign or state. Is that right? Man, this seems like a complicated one. So the overview is that suits against states. The allocation of power between the United States and several states, it prevents federal courts from construing their judicial power to allow states to be sued by citizens of any sovereign state or another state. Okay, so it's saying states can't be sued. At least the United States can't help them in doing that. That feels good. I can't say for sure. It's one of those messy, I literally can't imagine living in a federal system like the United States, because it used to be really like confederation style, and they've kind of gone into a federation where that seems dumb. So I'm putting it in the C tier. It feels very useful in some places, but I can't imagine how. So I'm gonna have to. I think before I leave it in there, I'm gonna look into the historical background on the 11th Amendment to see why it needed to be put in there. Basically, Alexander Chisholm, a citizen of South Carolina, sued the state of Georgia, those are both 2 of the original 13, to recover under contract for supplies executed with Georgia during the Revolution. In the Supreme Court's 1793 decision, 4 of the 5 justices agreed that a state could be sued under Article 3 jurisdictional provision, and the Supreme Court properly had original jurisdiction of the case. However, they reasoned that as common law barred suits against a sovereign, this principle applied to all states in their capacity as sovereigns, and consequently, states could not be subject to suit without their consent. So it's saying that if you don't agree to be sued, the United States isn't going to help you be sued, and that the states are sovereign on a legal level, which is kind of nuts when you think about it, because the states don't act sovereign in most ways, but they are in terms of lawsuits. That has to have all sorts of consequences. Again, I think it's amazing if you're thinking about the US in its original form. If you think about the US as it is right now, again, it's on the chopping block of does it need to exist? I feel like from the reading I did from Congress.gov, from their explanation, not necessarily, but I bet I could read a whole bunch more. So this next one is one I do know quite well because it comes up, I think it's related to Hamilton. The 12th Amendment is that electors shall meet in their respective states and vote for ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president, and shall make distinct lists of all persons voted. Basically, it's saying the president and the vice president. It used to be be that the president was whoever got the most votes, the vice president was whoever came second. People thought that was dumb, and instead you just vote for the president and the vice president at the same time. Honestly, I really like maybe just because I've watched Hamilton, I really like the old system. I would put this in F tier as a result, because wouldn't it be cool if right now we had a Trump-Harris government? Wouldn't it be cool if before that we had Biden-Trump? I think it would be crazy, but also that would be another check on the balance of power, right? And that way you would actually care about who is the second biggest party, whereas right now, you know, you pick your best party, and those other people, they'd be the bad people that you can't let into power at any chance. Having to know that you would work with your opposition would be great, but I'll concede it would be unworkable, so sure, I'll put it in the A tier, even though I think it would be cool, because it would probably make a lot of things less easy to do. The 13th Amendment is that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. Okay, so people have always mentioned that slavery is legal in the US, and I've always been like, what do you mean? What do you mean slavery is legal? Every time I've looked into the 13th Amendment, it's like, it's the one that abolishes slavery. You're dumb. But I see, the actual is that except as punishment for a crime, whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So does that mean that slavery is banned in like the US Virgin Islands? Not that they were gonna have slavery, or like, can you have slavery in like Puerto Rico? Is it like, obviously no one has slave, you know, like outside of the interesting modern Middle Eastern definition or the less modern United States carve out exception. I don't think anyone has slaves, but can you have it in like, you know, if I were to go to the Midway Atoll, would I be allowed to have slaves there? Anyway, so okay, coming back to this one, I think this is good. I think it's weird because it's obviously like no one is pro-slavery. Wait, where's 13th? Here it is. Why is it separate to the... No one is pro-slavery in 2025, but you could argue it's bad because it has that carve-out, saying you can be made a slave if you're a prisoner. Obviously, America has the highest prison population in the world, and so if we're being fair, I feel like this is one that will get me in some trouble if I put it low, right? Like, oh, are you pro-slavery, Toy Cat? It's like, no. But if you put it there, it's, are you pro-slavery, Toy Cat? You think that prisoners should be slaves? And so it's like, oof. I think I need to make a new tier for this, apparently. If it's going within a tier, it goes in the C tier for being one of those dumb amendments that seems like it doesn't achieve anything in the modern age. If you remove this amendment, slaves probably wouldn't just come back, right? I'm pretty sure. But also at the same time, it sort of explicitly allows you to have slaves. Would that make certain states therefore not use those slaves anymore? I don't know. But what I do know is this is a wonky amendment. So 14th Amendment, again, to me as a British person, actually, I'm not going to make that clarification. The British, you know, we as someone who was, you know how America was formed? It wasn't Americans, it was British people. We fought with ourselves and we won. We also lost, but we won. I want to remind you that British people were the winners of the Revolutionary War. And speaking of the Revolutionary War, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. This is a really funny one because this is the one I was referencing that come up later, but it's Boris Johnson is the funniest example. He is a British Prime Minister, but legally, during his time as a politician, he was actually a US citizen. He was born in New York to two British parents, and so he automatically got both citizenships. And funnily enough, it is a fun fact. If you don't do anything, unlike most countries, so I recently became Irish, you might know, I have to tell Ireland it's a multi-year process, and eventually they'll give you the citizenship and the passport. That's how most countries work. America is the only country that goes the opposite way, and they go, wait a minute, who's a citizen? I think you're a citizen, Mr. Johnson. And they come after you and they say, yeah, pay your tax bill. Because America is not only the only country that tries to come after people for being citizens, but they come after you for being a citizen on your worldwide income. If you've never lived in America, you owe America tax as an American citizen. And so I think Boris Johnson had to pay a crazy amount of money to get out of that. That's actually pretty wonky. And given that I think... Again, it's hard to say right now. This is one of those amendments that's actively being tested by the current United States government. But yeah, also there's a lot more in here. There's a section 2 talking about representatives. being apportioned through the several states. There's a section about no person shall be senator or representative of Congress unless they are a blah, 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 blah. But Congress may vote by 2/3 of each house to remove such a disability. Wait, if you can't be a senator or representative of Congress if you have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid to comfort enemies thereof. That's kind of wild, huh? Has that one ever come up? It seems kind of useless, but it's useful as an idea. The validity, who would vote for a politician who has aided the enemies of the United States? Anyway, so the validity of public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of Okay, this is a wacky set of things to combine into one. This is such a broad amendment. There's so much happening here, and so I guess also state income taxes were apparently come under this. I need to look into this. So apparently, this is the most complicated amendment on file, and all I can say right now is that's bad. Everyone should be able to understand an amendment within at least... I guess actually you could argue that's good, but it's the odd one out from the amendment, so I'm going to put it in the C tier. It probably seems like it has some good things in there, but it seems very hard to actually test or understand that. And the fact that even Congress.gov's simplified version gives you all of these amendments to the amendment explanations, I'm not in love with that. But that's just me as a British person trying to understand this in a medium form YouTube video. So next up we have the right of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or in previous condition of servitude. So again, I mean, you don't love the idea that this has to come into power, but it's a good amendment, right? Has it ever been... Let's see, actually. Has this been challenged? The right to vote clause generally, grandfather clauses, exclusion from primaries and literacy. Ooh, yeah. There's a lot happening with this one. We'll put it in the C tier, B tier, I think. It seems pretty good. I bet there's some controversy in it, and I can see why. Man, it's wild that this is a part of the Constitution. The 16th Amendment, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment amongst the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. So, Congress, it's interesting because I think this just came up in the 14th Amendment. I think it was something wild like income tax wasn't legal, and so America had to pass an amendment to the Constitution to make it legal. I mean, I don't love that. Like, who likes income tax? Is anyone? In fact, I think you could make an argument. It entirely depends on, do you think the government broadly spends money better than people themselves? If you think the answer is yes, S tier. Why is the government not taking 100% of your money and then just giving you back enough for you to live on? Any dollar spent could be better spent with them. Otherwise, I think that I think income taxes, generally speaking, taxes encourage people to avoid behavior. This is why companies move to the lowest tax jurisdiction. This is why we increase taxes on gambling or smoking, because it encourages people not to do those things. Why would we encourage people not to earn income? Seems like a bad amendment, therefore. If the Constitution specifically prohibits income taxes, then having even though you kind of have to have one to meet the modern world, I think that you should have made it more carved out. And again, I think you could broadly argue. I think that I talk about something interesting about America is it used to be very confederation. You know, Georgia and South Carolina were two sovereign states at one point, whereas now, like, what's the difference between them? You could argue a big part of why is because the federal government can take 37% of your income or whatever, and then now they are the ones who are in control of most of it, whereas Georgia's income tax, I don't know it, I'll throw it on screen, but I bet it's less than 10%, which therefore makes it less than a quarter of the overall. And the point here, wild amendment. 17th Amendment is the United States Senate shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. Wait, how? There was only the 17th Amendment by the time this happened? I need to look up. When did the 17th Amendment happen? Is this like really early on or something? 1912? Okay, one sec. How did it exist before then? So each senator gets 1 vote and they last for 6 years, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications. When vacancies happen in the representation of any state, the executive authority of such state shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. I think this is saying you have to vote for your senators. So before then, what happened? I don't understand. Why did you need a constitutional amendment? Okay, so I'm going to just read the Wikipedia page very briefly on this one. So popular elections are great because except it's bad because of what? Okay, so it turns out that every state besides Utah thinks that's cool, and Utah doesn't agree. Or I guess technically all of these states in the East don't love it too. Super interesting. So the Senate wasn't originally elected, or at least it wasn't originally forced to be elected. Interesting that would become an amendment. Speaking of amendments, oh actually we gotta put the 17th somewhere. So the 17th, I think, I like democracy. I agree with the idea of checks on democracy, but America has enough of those, so sure. A tier. I'm surprised, really. What would happen without the amendment, I guess, is the question. So after 1 year from the ratification of this article, the manufacturer's sale of... Okay, 18th Amendment. We found our first F tier, or our second F tier. This is the ban on alcohol. They banned alcohol, and what's crazy is they made the 18th Amendment, and then if I'm not mistaken, we get to the 21st Amendment, and it's just repealing the 18th. That's an inefficient way to do amendments. Therefore, I'm going to say the 21st Amendment, also stupid. Just pass neither of the amendments, dummies, and then you could have 25 instead of 27. Wouldn't 25 be such a nice number? Yes, it would. So we'll come back now for the 19th. The right of any citizen shall not be impeached. Wait, on account of sex? Oh, okay. So allowing women to vote. Some would make a joke about this. Obviously, I shan't be doing that, and I'll say... you obviously need to have right to vote for everyone who lives inside of a democracy. You can just about see the argument that, like, if you need to have a stake in democracy. So I can see countries that say you have to serve in the military or you have to own land. But even then, you should say not on the basis of sex or gender, right? Like, a land-owning woman has a much better right to vote than a non-land-owning, non-army-serving man. Probably, if you are going to go down that rabbit hole, right? So we'll put it in S tier because, I mean, that's what we're going to do, okay? So next up here, we've got the 20th Amendment, which is the president and the vice president on the free day of January. Is that a typo, or is that what they really wrote in the amendment? I need to know right now. Is that it sounds like there was a mistake here. So what is the 20th Amendment? If at any time for the beginning of the term of president, the president-elect shall have died, the vice president shall become president. Honestly, that has all sorts of goofy distortions. I think that's like a C tier thing. Like, I think personally, I do believe, as someone who lives in a parliamentary system, the automatic vice president should be the House of Representatives person, because the president is meant to be elected largely more by the people than by the states, right? The Senate is for the states, the Congress is for the people, and the House of Representatives are for the people, and the president is a little bit of a hybrid, but leaning more towards the people. Whereas the vice president, like, I don't imagine most people would not vote for a candidate based on their vice candidate, or their vice presidential candidate. However, a lot of people might not vote for a party in Congress based on their, what is the word? Leader of the House? House leader? What do Americans call their prime minister? Leader of the House? Nope, that's a British thing. What, you know, actually, I'll go to Nancy Pelosi, and I'll find out what role she had. She's a very, very wealthy woman in it, so must pay well, right? So she's Speaker of the House. So I think the Speaker of the House would be a better one. Therefore, I think 20th Amendment, honestly, D tier. I think it's a bad amendment, but I'm British. So speaking of being British, the 22nd Amendment. No person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term shall be elected to the... Okay, I don't like that part. I think, in theory, term limits sound great. As someone, you know, like, I don't know, like, there's all sorts of downsides and upsides. So I think the two most contentious presidents that people would like to have a third term are the current one, Mr. Trump himself, and Obama, right? I think lots of people would love to have a third term of Obama. A lot of people would love to have a third term of Trump. And so I think that raises the point of why this is actually a good thing. Term limits seem really dumb because democracies should keep that in check themselves. But also, one of the dangerous things about, like parliamentary, one of the dangerous things about a system of picking a leader who gets to have authority is they can make rules to make it easier for themselves. Having a forced check on their power of like, yep, you couldn't go further if you wanted to, is great. In theory, they could pass the constitutional amendment or whatever else, but I think it's much better to be like, they have to just endorse someone else to replace them, and you can trust that endorsement or not. 22nd seems great. 23rd, the district constituting the seat of government of the United States shall appoint in such manner at the Congress may... it's saying the way that... I think this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is saying the way that... Okay, I'm going to have to look at the United States Constitution. I'm going to have to explain. 23rd Amendment explained. I'm going to make sure I get this one. It says people in the District of Columbia should vote. I feel like it didn't say that at all. So it says... Oh, it says which the district would be entitled if it were a state, but in no event more than the least populous state. So the District of Columbia gets to vote like it's a state, but only in presidential elections. Feels like a goofy compromise. Goofy compromises go in the D tier. Like, put them in there, sure. Doesn't mean I have to like them. The 24th Amendment is the right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors for the president or vice president, or for Senate or representative in Congress, shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. So I think that's saying you don't have to pay a poll tax just to be a representative. Seems good. I'm pretty sure that's a good one. 25th Amendment. In the case of removal for president from office or his death or resignation, vice president shall become president. I feel like they had a whole separate amendment for that one. So then there's Section 2, Section 3, Section 4. This clarifies what I'm saying. Disagree with the ordering though. Again, I think Speaker of the House should be higher in there. But I'll concede I'm being British, so I'll put that in D tier for now. The 26th Amendment... Wait. 25th, I'm putting that. 26th Amendment. Okay, 2 to go now. The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States. So it's just the same thing as before. I think you can make a decent argument that 18-year-olds shouldn't vote, but I think that within the system as it exists, like, yeah, 18, if you're allowed to shoot guns and fight for your country, you should also be allowed to vote. You could maybe make it a rule where if you're in the military, maybe the age should be like 25 by default, and other things that you do can reduce that age. So, for example, owning land, take a year off. Serving in the military, take 3 years off. If you take a government test in civics, you get another 2 years off. That would be my preferred system, because at some age you do become a fully independent adult and you should make decisions. Is that age always 18? No, I think it probably balances a tiny bit older, but I also think there are probably some 16-year-olds who have a much better understanding of politics, or even 14-year-olds who have a better understanding of politics and a better understanding of where it goes. So yeah, B tier, because it's got the right vibes, but again, it's not how I would choose these things. So the 27th Amendment, no law varying the compensation for the services of senators and representatives shall take effect until the election of representatives have... Oh, it's saying you cut the House of Representatives can't decide how much it gets paid until the next House of Representatives is there. You can't vote on your own salary. You can vote on your successor's salary. Your predecessor votes on your salary. That's smart. I don't know if it was needed. I don't know if Congress members were consistently voting on their own salary, but sure, S tier. I don't think the politicians should set their own salary, but they should set their own salary, and that's a great compromise. This is my official tier list. I don't know what you can do with it. I can download it, apparently. myimage.png. And if you want to rate this tier list, use the comments down below to do precisely that. Otherwise, while we've got all sorts of Americans saying that I shouldn't be making videos on American politics, you better believe that we'll be seeing slightly more of those as a result. You want to see my opinions on US state mottos or whatever else? We might do precisely that, because it's America time, baby. Speaking of America time, I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a good, well, it'd be good night for me, so have a good afternoon. Goodbye, folks. Honestly, interesting what a shape it makes, right? Do you see that? I see that. It looks like the outline of someone wearing a hat. Maybe a certain president. Anyway, have a good day. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.